Imagine this, a library, deep in the desert, that completely rewrites what we think we know about history. A library holding hundreds of thousands of ancient manuscripts from an intellectual powerhouse that, for centuries, Europe insisted never even existed. And get this, just a few years ago, in 2012, there was this insane rescue mission to save it all from being turned to ash. So yeah, let's get into it.
It sounds like one of those impossible brain teasers, doesn't it? How do you smuggle an entire library? But back in 2012, this wasn't a game. It was a terrifyingly real question for the librarians of Timbuktu, as extremists who wanted to destroy this knowledge were closing in. And the answer they came up with? Wow, it was just brilliant.
Okay, so picture this. You've got this secret network, scholars, librarians, just regular folks, and they pull off one of the most daring acts of cultural preservation in modern history. They're packing these priceless, ancient texts into old metal footlockers, and then in the dead of night, they start smuggling themselves to safety. I mean, they used whatever they could get their hands on. Donkey carts, tiny boats on the Niger River, crammed into the back of trucks. It makes you wonder what on earth was in those boxes that was worth risking everything for. This is what they were saving. We're not talking about a couple dozen books here, or even a few thousand. We're talking about an estimated 700,000 manuscripts. Just let that number sink in for a second. 700,000. That's the mind-boggling scale of the treasure they were trying to save.
So, okay, what's the big deal with all these documents? Why are they so important? Well, it really comes down to the incredible range of what's inside them. You might think, oh, it's probably all religious texts. But nope, not even close. This is like a complete encyclopedia of human thought.
I mean, you crack these open and you find things like detailed star charts and predictions for eclipses. You find manuals on surgical techniques and pharmacology. There are complex treatises on algebra and geometry. You've got sophisticated legal contracts, super detailed histories of West African kingdoms, diplomatic letters, and on top of all that, beautiful poetry. It's literally a whole universe of knowledge on paper. So the big question is, how did this unbelievable collection of scholarship even end up in a city on the edge of the Sahara Desert? It seems so out of place, right? Well, to figure that out, we've got to rewind the clock and look at Timbuktu's golden age, a time when it was, believe it or not, one of the most important intellectual and commercial hubs on the entire planet. And you really can't tell the story of Timbuktu without talking about this guy, Mansa Musa. You may have heard of him. He's often called the richest person in all of history. On his famous pilgrimage to Mecca way back in 1324, he spent so much gold he actually crashed the economy in Egypt for a decade, a whole decade. And on his way back home, he brought the greatest scholars, architects, and books back with him to Timbuktu. He pretty much single-handedly turned the city into this global beacon of learning. And this is where things get really wild. Look at this scale. The heart of this whole intellectual boom was the Sankoria University. At its absolute peak, it had something like 25,000 students. Now, to put that in perspective, the University of Oxford, at the very same time, had maybe 400 students. It's not even close. Think about it. 1 out of every 4 people in the city of Timbuktu was a student or a scholar. The entire city was basically dedicated to knowledge. And this whole tradition was personified by scholars like Ahmad Baba. This guy was a renowned historian and legal expert, and his personal library was legendary. We're talking 1,600 books of his own, which was massive for a private collection back then. And he was just one of many, you know? These scholars created this amazing culture of writing, debating, and most importantly, preserving knowledge, passing it down through their families for centuries. So, why does all this matter so much today? Why is this story about a vibrant, intellectual African city so crucial? Because the very fact that this library exists absolutely shatters one of the most damaging and persistent myths in all of history. And this was the lie that was used to justify colonialism for centuries. It was an idea pushed by really influential European thinkers, like the philosopher Hegel here, who basically said that Africa had no history, no culture, nothing worth mentioning. This whole narrative of a dark continent that was empty of achievement, well, that was the intellectual cover story for conquest and exploitation. Which brings us to the most crucial point. Every single one of those 700,000 manuscripts is a direct physical takedown of that lie. It's the ultimate rebuttal. I mean, how can you possibly argue that a continent has no written history when you're faced with hundreds of thousands of books staring back at you, proving you dead wrong? And this just lays it out so clearly, the stark contrast.
The myth said no written tradition. The reality, over 700,000 manuscripts. The myth said no universities. The reality? Sankore, a massive global center of learning that put its European peers to shame. The myth said no advanced science. The reality? Texts on astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. See, the colonial narrative, it wasn't just an innocent mistake. It was a deliberate, calculated erasure of history.
So that heroic rescue in 2012, it was amazing. It saved the manuscripts from being instantly destroyed by extremists. But, and this is a big but, the fight to preserve this incredible legacy, yeah, that's far from over.
Today, the collection faces a different kind of enemy, a quieter one, but just as dangerous. You've got the harsh Saharan climate, which is just brutal on old paper and ink. You have insects literally eating the pages, and on top of all that, there's a serious lack of funding for conservation, not to mention the ongoing political instability in the region. All of it makes saving these texts for the long term a monumental challenge. This knowledge is so fragile, and it's still very much at risk.
And that really gets to the heart of why this all matters so much. Timbuktu isn't just some dusty, faraway metaphor for a place. It's a real city with a real library full of proof. Proof that African scholars were charting the stars and debating philosophy at a time when Europe was building the myths it would later use to colonize them. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this quote. What does it do to our understanding of history when the evidence that completely overturns a global lie has been hiding in plain sight this whole time?